One of the things that I always like to do when I'm out visiting battle sites is go to any nearby wartime cemeteries. And for that reason, I'm going to visit this place behind me, here in Belgium, in the Ardennes. This is Henri-Chapelle American Cemetery. And at this location, there are 7,987 soldiers buried of World War II. And it's not just Battle of the Bulge soldiers that were killed, but also Hurtgen Forest, even some from Normandy and from the Netherlands as well. So I'm going to take you with me as I go in. I'm going to visit some of the graves that have a story behind it that is maybe more well known, and I'm also going to visit one grave that is very special to me, and that is of a soldier whose grave I adopted here at Henri-Chapelle American Cemetery. The first grave that I wanted to show to you guys is this grave right here. This is the grave of the soldier that I adopted, and through the website of the people that take care of this cemetery and all the others, you have the chance to become a sentinel of memory, and you can also become a primary sentinel of memory, and it means that you've basically adopted this grave. And on the website it states, becoming a primary sentinel of memory is an obligation of remembrance. Primary sentinels commit to visit and present flowers at the grave of the servicemen to whom they were assigned, typically at least once a year. Primary sentinels also help us learn more about who the soldier was as a person. When possible, primary sentinels reach out to the family members and other sentinels of memory of that particular serviceman in a mutual effort to discover more information and contribute that information to the serviceman tribute page. The commitment to serve as a primary sentinel is for a renewable period of 3 years. So yeah, becoming a primary sentinel of memory comes with a certain obligation and a responsibility, and it's a responsibility I gladly took upon myself to honor this soldier who gave his life during World War II. And Leon Barton was born in 1925 in Tropic, Utah. He enlisted in the army in September of 1943. He was assigned to the 823rd Tank Destroyer Battalion, which saw action during the Battle of the Bulge. I know that he was wounded at Thierry-Mont. It's a small town not from the German and Luxembourg borders. He was evacuated and died from his wounds on January 15th, 1945, as you can see on his gravestone. I have multiple documents about Leon and where he served, how he died, where he got wounded, what his wounds were. I know nothing about his family though, and I'm currently in the process to find out more. Maybe there are some living relatives in the United States that are still alive. When I find them, I will try to reach out to them and make sure they know that somebody's looking after the grave of the family member. So that's Leon C. Barton, the grave that I've adopted. If you ever maybe have interest in adopting a grave at this cemetery or at any other, to do it in Margraten in the Netherlands. That cemetery actually has a waiting list. All the graves are adopted there. But I'll put a link in the description with the website. You can check it out. Maybe you become a sentinel of memory or primary sentinel of memory at a different cemetery. You can see two graves side by side. Both have the Star of David as a headstone. And this first one right here, that's the grave of Louis Unger with an E, and next to him we have Joseph Unger with an A. Spelled differently, but in fact these two guys here are brothers. They immigrated to the United States in 1922 from Hungary, and when they arrived at Ellis Island, they kind of mixed up their last names, wrote them down different, and they both fought in World War II. And when they died, it gave the guys from the grave registration a lot of headaches because of their last names spelled differently. Joseph Unger, you can see here, was a private first class with the 7th Infantry 3rd Division, born in New York, or that's where he lived, because he immigrated to the United States, and he was killed on January 16th, 1945. And his brother is right next to him, Private 3rd Armored Division, died November 2nd, 1944. So that's pretty cool that they placed the two brothers side by side. Here we have the grave of Gilkey Hall, and right next to him is his brother, Daniel Hall. So another set of brothers, just like the Unger brothers that we just saw. And as you can see, talked about a little bit in the opening that most of the guys buried here are from the Battle of the Bulge or the Hurricane Forest. But as you can see, that Gilkey Hall, he died on June 7th, 1944, the day after D-Day. He was actually killed at Omaha Beach. He was part of the Big Red One, 1st Infantry Division, and he was moved here to rest side by side with his brother, who died about a half year later on January 25th, 1945. It was a private first class, 359th Infantry. So yeah, burials like this also happens at places like Henri-Chapelle Cemetery and all the other cemeteries. Brothers moved to be close together. So one brother killed in the Normandy campaign, one brother killed, I think, during the Battle of the Bulge. So resting side by side, which to me is, it's great, it's amazing. Now I've come to the grave of Richard F. Wiegand, and quite recently I was on a tour with View 506, and we actually visited the place where Richard Wiegand was killed, and he has a little memorial at that place. His company clashed with tanks of the German 2nd SS Das Reich Panzer Division, and he was killed in action. And he took out a tank with a bazooka. And in the Ardennes they have a little memorial set up with his picture on it to commemorate his actions, because of his actions the road was blocked with the tank he took out, and the other tanks that were advancing up the road couldn't. They were stopped in their tracks basically, and he saved a lot of lives, and he was awarded a Silver Star for that action. Now arrived at a very special grave here at Henri-Chapelle American Cemetery, and that's the grave of Bernard Woodland, and he was the only African American soldier who served with the 82nd Airborne. So Bernard was the son of black parents, but his skin was fairly light, so he decided to forge his birth certificate. He saw action in North Africa, he saw action in Italy. His unit was held back during D-Day, so he didn't see any action there, but he did drop in the Netherlands during Operation Market Garden, and that's where he was seriously wounded at the Nijmegen Bridge during the famous Waal crossing. and he was evacuated to a hospital here in Belgium, and that's where he passed away from his wounds. That's why he is buried here at Henri-Chapelle in Belgium, instead of being buried in, let's say, Margrieten. That was probably the place he would be buried if he died over there, but he died in a hospital here in Belgium, and that's why he was buried here. So pretty amazing story. The only African American or black soldier that fought with the 82nd Airborne. This is the grave of Richard J. Hughes, and as you can see on his headstone, Private 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, 101st Airborne, and that is the unit that is made famous by Band of Brothers. And Richard Hughes actually was a member of Easy Company. He's the only guy from Easy Company that is buried here. He enlisted in January of 1944 and joined Easy Company as a replacement after Market Garden. He fought in the Ardennes during the Battle of the Bulge, and according to the website of the American Overseas Memorial Day Association, that's the organization that remembers all the fallen soldiers, he was killed by a sniper's bullet on January 9th, 1945. And in the Bois Jacques you have the memorial, the Easy Company Memorial, and his name is also on that memorial. So this is Richard Hughes of the famous Easy Company. This is the grave of Truman Kimbro, and as you can see, this grave is different from all the other graves at the cemetery and at any cemetery that you ever visited, the American cemeteries. All the writing is in gold, and as you can see here, it says Medal of Honor. So if any soldier on a cemetery has been awarded the Medal of Honor, the cross would be like this, all the letters in gold. There are actually 3 people buried here who've been awarded the Medal of Honor, and Truman Kimbro is one of them. And not so long ago I was at the site where he got killed and where he performed his actions that led to him being awarded the Medal of Honor. And he was part of the 2nd Engineering Combat Battalion, and his unit was ordered to emplace mines and obstacles in front of a ridge to slow down the enemy advancement, the German advancement. And on December 19th, after several unsuccessful attempts and having left his squad in a protected location, Truman Kimbro decided to lay the mines himself while under heavy enemy fire. After successfully completing his mission, he was killed by the enemy while attempting to crawl away from his objective. And for his service and bravery, he was awarded the Medal of Honor, as well as the Purple Heart. I'm now sitting by the grave of James A. Stewart, who was a technician 4th class with the 333rd Field Artillery Battalion. And this is actually a pretty special grave here at Henri-Chapelle, because James Stewart was a soldier that was part of the Wereth 11 story that you might have heard of. It was a massacre that took place on the same day as the Malmedy massacre. But this particular incident was about 11 black soldiers that were separated from their units, and they started just walking, trying to find American positions and a safe haven. And after walking for quite a while, they knocked on the door of a house, and the owner of the house let them in. He gave them food, he gave them drinks so they could warm up. And the village of Wereth, where they sought shelter, where that house was, that's close to the German border, and actually that whole region was German until World War I. After World War I, Belgium basically took, or was given, that section of land, and a lot of people in that village, it was only 9 houses, but there were a couple of families that were strong sympathizers with the Germans. And when one of the inhabitants of the village found out there were some American soldiers, black soldiers, hiding in a house, in their village they went to soldiers of the SS, and they came to the house and they took away the Wereth 11 into a field where they were brutally beaten, tortured. I think some of the guys had their fingers cut off, mainly because they had like a gold ring on their finger, but yeah, they were severely beaten, tortured. They found out during the autopsies. They were bayoneted, some were bayoneted to the head, real nasty stuff, and then they were just left out in that field. And because it was, that whole region was now in German hands, they were just lying there in the fields for weeks, covered with snow. And after like 6 weeks, the Americans moved back into in that region, and their bodies were found by the same family where they sought shelter previously. 7 of them are buried here at Henri-Chapelle American Cemetery. This is James A. Stewart, one of the Wereth 11. 2 rows over from where James Stewart is buried, he is buried right over there. And this is the grave of Carl R. Genthner, I think you pronounce it, First Lieutenant, 575th Ambulance Company. He was an officer with the US Army Medical Corps. As you can see, he's the ambulance company. And he was one of the casualties of the famous Malmedy massacre. He saw action in North Africa, Italy, and on D-Day. And on December 17th, 1944, he was captured by Kampfgruppe Piper of the 1st SS Panzer Division. And the convoy Genthner was part of was attacked by Piper and his men. And it is believed that around 120 soldiers were captured. They were placed in a farmer's field, and all of a sudden the Germans opened fire on their prisoners, killing most of them. And Carl Genthner, who was buried here, was among those dead. And later, when the Americans got to that site, lots of prisoners were found with gunshots to the head, meaning the Germans executed everyone who didn't die initially from the bullets that were fired upon them. 43 soldiers survived the Malmedy massacre, running for their lives into a nearby forest. And 21 of the soldiers that were killed at the Malmedy massacre are buried here at Henri-Chapelle, and Carl Genthner was one of those guys. If you ever visited a war cemetery, World War I, World War II, German, American, British, doesn't really matter, all of them have graves of unknown soldiers. Sometimes you see 1, 2, maybe 3 unknown soldiers buried together, but here at Henri-Chapelle you have a grave with 6 unknown soldiers buried together in one grave, and we're gonna go there right now. And this is that grave. You can see on the headstone it says, "Here rest in honored glory 6 comrades in arms, known but to God." And like I said, I've never seen that before in any of the cemeteries that I visit. 6 soldiers buried in one grave, and I have really no idea why these 6 were buried in one grave, because there are a bunch of unknown soldiers on this cemetery, and they all have their own graves. In fact, there are 94 unknown soldiers buried here at Henri-Chapelle, and all of them have their own graves except these 6 guys who were buried right here. Early on in this video I visited a couple of graves of brothers that were buried here together, and this cemetery of Henri-Chapelle also has quite a unique set of brothers buried together, and that's the graves of actually 3 brothers that are buried side by side. And that's also something that I've never seen of all the cemeteries that I visited. Most of the times it's 2 brothers buried side by side, but here at Henri-Chapelle you have 3 brothers buried together. And I'm standing at that site now, and I'm going to show you their graves. So here we have the grave of Robert D. Tester. He was a sergeant, died November 26, 1943. Next to him is his brother, Glenn W. Tester, died January 9th, 1945. And next to him is the other brother, James E. Tester. He was killed on September 17th, 1944. And there's something that is pretty unique as well to this, because they are three brothers, but this guy, his headstone says Tennessee. This brother's grave says Oregon. And the final brother, his gravestone says Illinois. And being brothers, of course, they were born in the same state, in the same town, but the three different states on their headstones are the states where these men actually enlisted in. So not the place that they were born. And Robert Tester, who was buried here, he was killed in North Africa. His brother next to him, who died on January 9th, 1945, Glenn Tester, he died in France. And the final brother, James Tester, died September 17th, 1944 in Germany.